Welcome to Executive Access, your home for real talk with industry leaders. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. What if your biggest strength is actually sabotaging you? One of the biggest ahas that I've had in my coaching practice is that oftentimes the things that are our best strengths, when we overdo them, can be our most problematic weaknesses as well. Said another way, we're often encouraged to learn more about our strengths and weaknesses. There are many tools in the market that can help us do this. Sometimes and often we make a list of our weaknesses and we build development plans around how we can improve those weaknesses. And there's even some models that say, don't worry about your weaknesses so much, like Strength Finder. Lean into your strengths and really just focus on making those even better. But both of these approaches are absolutely incomplete. What I have found is that the relationship between strengths and weaknesses is way more complicated. Those things are actually so much more deeply interwoven. What if the way we are leaning into our biggest strength is also causing it to be our biggest weakness? What if these overused strengths are actually causing big problems for your team? Let me give you a couple examples. I worked with a phenomenal leader of a growth technology company. Everybody on his team appreciated him, liked him. He was highly effective. One of his big strengths was empathy. He could really understand where his team members were coming from. He could empathize with a missed deadline, with what was going on in their lives to really encourage them to do their work. Well, in one respect, he overused this strength because one time he had a team member that was consistently missing deadlines. He also was in a role that was misunderstood and lacked clarity for himself and for the rest of the team. And so while my particular leader I was working with was leaning into his empathy, what happened is later on when the company had to make some serious decisions around cuts to the organization, his team member was the first one asked to leave because nobody really understood what he was working on and the impact of his role was not clearly understood. So in this respect, this particular leader's empathy, really empathizing with the challenges of the role and what was happening, was turning into a big weaknesses, not holding another person accountable, not bringing clarity to the role, and not helping this person make the kind of progress that would show impact in the organization. Another example, I work with a phenomenal leader who has one of the most strategic minds that I've ever worked with. This person can see around corners. They are so strategic in how they think about things. They really can scan the market for signals and understand and bring those things back in the organization to keep that organization one step ahead. It's absolutely phenomenal. And when I hear him speak, it's incredibly motivating. What a phenomenal strength. The challenge for this person when he overdoes that strength is he shows up in team meetings, leaning into that strategic communication and leaves people sometimes not making a clear connection around how all of the strategy, what it actually means for the people in their day-to-day roles. And so oftentimes people are confused. They lack clarity on what they need to do to leave that meeting and go out and be effective the next day. They also sometimes leave confused, wondering if we're changing direction, right? So all of this strategic, amazing strength can turn into a weakness if it's overdone. And finally, I'll turn the finger at myself a little bit. So one of the things that I feel like is a strength of mine is broad systems thinking. I can think about a problem and I can naturally understand how to pull in different parts of the organization. I see the interconnectedness of things, and so I can rally large groups cross-team to go after a big goal. It's actually a phenomenal skill that has served me well. So where has this shown up as a weakness? Well, quite often, sometimes I'm still pulling things in, I'm still synthesizing, I'm wondering how it's touching every single piece. And I know this has caused in the past some frustration with my team where they've said to me, Jamie, it's time to make a decision. Jamie, it's time to move forward. What are we actually going to do? And thank goodness I've had people around me that could nudge me in that direction. So these are all great examples of phenomenal strengths, things that make us as great as we are in our vocation, that when we overdo them or are not careful to monitor them can become a big weakness for ourselves and our leadership, and also a big problem for our teams. So I'll ask you, what are your biggest strengths? And are they sometimes quietly sabotaging you? if you're interested in exploring this, there's 3 things I would encourage you to do. The first is always self-awareness. Are you aware of what your biggest strengths are? And if not, ask around. And ask yourself, how might I be overdoing it sometimes? And where is that showing up? I feel like if you ask the people that work with you most closely, they'll tell you if you ask them in the right way. So the first is self-awareness. The second thing you can do is when you're aware of that amazing strength that you have, that sometimes you might overdo to negative consequences, identify an action that you can take that will mitigate against you doing that. I'll give you a great example. When I started recognizing that my strength around systems thinking was actually causing me at times to be indecisive and causing stress on my team, I put a practice in place that at the end of every meeting, I would ask myself and ask the team, okay, what are we deciding to do? From all of this great conversation, what did we just decide to do today? And I forced myself to always end every meeting with an action. It was just a simple practice that I put in place that I use to this day. So what is the practice or the action that you're going to put in place to just recognize that you're often going to overdo your strengths? And how do you put a practice in place to mitigate that? And lastly, consider the people around you. Probably the best person around me at the time that I was starting to realize that I was probably overdoing my strength around systems thinking was a phenomenal leader on my team who is incredibly operationally focused, that would stop me in my tracks and say, okay, Jamie, it's time to make a decision. I valued that person greatly. So consider when you build the teams and your work groups around you, who are you putting at your side that has complementary skill sets that's going to help you recognize when you're overdoing your strength and help you move towards a better resolution? I hope you enjoyed today's content. Please drop a comment. Let me know how this practice is going in your leadership journey. And please subscribe to get every episode of the Executive Access.